I've always believed that free stuff comes with a price. Free samples at the grocery store? They just want you hooked. Free trial of a streaming service? You'll forget to cancel and suddenly you're funding their CEO's third yacht. Free game night with a $100,000 cash prize? That one should have set off alarms. But here I was, standing outside a decaying, centuries-old mansion, staring at the crumpled invitation in my hand. The thing looked handwritten, like it had been scrawled by a Victorian ghost with trust issues. You are invited to an exclusive game night. The winner takes home $100,000. Do you have what it takes? It didn't even say who was hosting. No phone number, no RSVP details. Just an address and a meeting time. Red flags everywhere. And yet, I came. I wasn't the only idiot, either. 6 of us lingered outside the wrought iron gate, eyeing each other like contestants on a twisted reality show. Nobody spoke at first. We were all probably thinking the same thing. This is either a scam or something much worse. But if it's real, $100,000 is a life changer. If someone dies first, I'm running. A gust of wind rattled the trees. The mansion loomed over us, its windows black and hollow, like empty eye sockets. No porch lights. No sound. Just stillness. Someone finally cleared their throat. So, anybody know what the hell we're actually playing? The one who spoke was a tall, lanky guy in his late 20s, wearing a faded Stranger Things hoodie. He looked like the type who spent way too much time on Reddit conspiracy threads. Don't know, said the girl next to him, popping gum in her mouth. She had dyed blue hair, ripped fishnets, and an expression that screamed, I don't care, but I care a little. Guess we find out when we go in. Another guy, muscular, clean-cut, probably a former college athlete, sighed. Look, if this is some elaborate influencer prank, I swear to God. Right? A blonde girl interrupted. She clutched her designer purse like it contained her will to live. I was so sure this was like a Mr. Beast challenge or something, but I checked Twitter. Nothing. No hashtags. No viral trends. Maybe because it's not a YouTube stunt, said a quiet voice. We all turned. The guy who spoke had sharp features, dark eyes, and the general aura of a human red flag. He had that mysterious loner energy that teenage girls write Wattpad stories about. Then what is it? I asked, finally jumping in. He just shrugged. We'll see. His vague answer sent a ripple of unease through the group. Who even was this guy? Alright, cool, said Stranger Things hoodie. Now that we've all established we have zero information, should we knock or something? As if on cue, the iron gates groaned open on their own. Nobody touched them. Nobody moved. We all just stood there, staring at the open pathway leading to the mansion's entrance, our bodies screaming, do not go in there. But $100,000 has a way of making people ignore their survival instincts. One by one, we stepped inside. The front doors opened with an eerie, slow creak, like something out of a horror movie. Seriously, it was almost cliché. You'd think ghosts would invest in WD-40. Inside, the air smelled old, dust, wood, and something faintly metallic. Dim chandelier light flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the peeling wallpaper. At the center of the grand hall sat a massive circular table, and on that table, a board game. It was old and wooden, the kind of thing you'd expect to find in a cursed antique shop. The board itself was carved with strange symbols, spirals and runes that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. The words the game were burned into the wood, and the dice? They weren't normal. They were jet black, their numbers glowing like embers. The butler appeared out of nowhere. I mean, that literally 1 second the room was empty. The next, he was just there, tall, skeletal, pale as hell. He wore an old-fashioned black suit, his white gloves so clean they practically gleamed. Welcome, he said in a voice like crunching leaves. Blonde purse girl jumped. Jesus, where did you? The butler ignored her. His eyes, pale gray, almost silver, swept over us like we were already corpses. Please take a seat. Nobody moved. I mean, would you sit down if a ghoul in a tuxedo told you to? But then something strange happened. The chairs pulled themselves out. I swear to God, the wooden legs scraped against the floor, moving on their own, like invisible hands were guiding them. One chair even nudged my leg, impatient. What the fuck? Muttered Stranger Things hoodie. Blonde purse girl shook her head. Nope, nope, nope. Nope, I'm not doing haunted furniture. Sit. the butler said. It wasn't a request. Something in his tone squeezed my lungs. It felt less like a voice, more like an order that wormed its way into my brain. I didn't want to obey, but I did. We all did. One by one, we sat at the table. The butler smiled. It was wrong, that smile, too wide, too cold. Shall we begin? The board game shuddered. The dice rolled on their own. The game had started, and none of us could leave. I should have walked out. I mean, let's be real. Anyone with an ounce of common sense would have noped the hell out the second chairs started moving on their own. But logic has a funny way of leaving the chat when there's $100,000 on the table. And now I was sitting at this damn cursed board game, staring at a pair of dice that had just rolled on their own. 6. The number glowed red, pulsing like a heartbeat. The board shifted, its wooden surface splitting apart like cracked earth. The symbols rearranged themselves into words, etched deep into the grain. Player 1. James. The name burned itself onto the board. James, aka Stranger Things Hoodie, let out a nervous laugh. Alright, cool. Guess I'm up first. The butler nodded, silent and smiling. His hands folded in front of him like he was waiting to watch something die. James hesitated. Then he reached for his game piece, a small wooden figurine that looked eerily like him. The second his fingers made contact, the entire room shook. Actually shook, like a freaking earthquake. The air turned thick and cold, like we'd been plunged underwater. And then the lights died. I know it sounds cliché, but this wasn't normal darkness. It wasn't just the lights going out. It was complete void. No moonlight from the windows. No glow from our phones. Not even that weird green static your eyes see when it's too dark to focus. It was like the entire world had been erased. Someone gasped. A chair scraped against the floor. Hello? Blonde purse girl's voice wavered. Is this part of the game? I heard breathing. Heavy, wet breathing. Not from James. Not from any of us. Something else was in here. Then click. A single overhead light snapped on, buzzing dimly like a dying street lamp. It illuminated only James, his hands gripping the table. His face was frozen, caught between confusion and horror. The rest of us? We were in pure darkness. We could see him, but he couldn't see us. What the hell is happening? James' voice cracked. Where'd you guys go? We were right there, right in front of him, but it was like we had been erased from his reality. Then the board shifted again. A new message carved itself into the wood. Underneath, smaller text burned into existence. James, the shadows know you. They have been waiting. Do not let them take you. Survive for 60 seconds. The countdown began. 60. James let out a nervous laugh.
Okay. Bayfun.
Real immersive. Do I get VR goggles next? 55. The darkness moved. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just shadows shifting. But no, something was crawling out of the dark. 50. A hand, long and skeletal, its fingers stretching unnaturally far, emerged from the void. 45. Then another, and another. The hands slithered onto the table, their nails black and cracked, like they had been rotting underground. We screamed. James didn't, because he didn't see them. 40. The hands gripped his arms. His eyes widened. What the fuck? What? 35. He yanked his arm back, but his sleeve ripped, like something was pulling him. We saw it. We saw the hands clawing at him, digging into his skin. But to James, it was invisible. 30. Guys? Something's... He screamed as a gash ripped open on his forearm, deep and bleeding. The hands were tearing into him. 25. He thrashed, trying to shake them off. Help me. Somebody help me. We couldn't even move. The butler stood there watching, his smile widening. 20. The hands dragged him down. His chair toppled, but he didn't hit the floor. He was sinking, like the ground itself was swallowing him. His legs disappeared into the black void. Then his torso. Then his screams. 10. Only his face remained above the darkness, terror frozen in his eyes. 5. James reached out. Please, 0. The light flickered out. A wet, tearing sound echoed through the room. The light snapped back on. James was gone. The only thing left was his game piece, still sitting on the board. Silence. None of us moved. None of us breathed. We just stared at the empty chair, at the blood smeared on the table. Blonde purse girl was shaking. Tell me that was fake. Tell me that was fucking fake. No one answered, because it wasn't fake. James was gone. The butler clapped his hands together, slow and mocking. Excellent. My stomach churned. What the hell just happened? He tilted his head. James lost. Rage burned through me. I pushed back from the table, nearly knocking my chair over.
No.
Nope, fuck this. I'm out. I turned to the door. It was gone. I mean that literally. The grand entrance, the one we had walked through less than an hour ago, was nothing but a solid wall now. I spun around. Where's the door? Where the fuck is the door? The butler's grin widened. The game, he said smoothly, must be finished. On the board, the dice rolled again. The next name burned. Player 2, Lexi. Blonde purse girl let out a choked sob, and the room began to change. James was gone. 1 second, he was screaming for us to save him. The next, he was swallowed by the dark, leaving behind nothing but a tiny wooden version of himself sitting on the board. I stared at his game piece. It looked identical to him, hoodie, sneakers, even the stupid way he slouched. But James was gone, like he'd never existed. Blonde purse girl Lexi was hyperventilating, hands shaking, breath coming in ragged gasps.
No.
No, this isn't happening. She grabbed at her phone, tapping frantically. Someone call for help, please. But when she turned the screen around, no service. Not one bar. Not SOS mode. Just nothing. Like our phones were props in a movie. Her voice broke. Guys? My phone's not working. The rest of us checked ours. Same thing. The mansion had cut us off completely. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay even. Okay, maybe we can. A sickening crash came from the hallway behind us. We all jumped. Lexi let out a muffled scream, clutching her designer purse like it could save her from whatever the hell made that noise. We turned toward the entrance, the place where, just minutes ago, there had been a grand set of double doors leading outside. Now, nothing but a blank wall. No doors.
No windows.
No escape. The butler's voice was calm. Too calm. The game must be played. Lexi let out a choked sob. I don't want to play. I don't want to do this. The board didn't care. Her name was already burned into the wood. Player 2. Lexi the dice, as if mocking her, rolled on their own. The 3. The board rippled, like something alive was underneath it. The wood split apart, the symbols rearranging themselves into words. Second challenge. Staring contest underneath. Smaller text burned into existence. Don't blink. Don't look away. Keep your eyes on the mirror for 60 seconds. Lexi blinked rapidly, as if she could somehow prepare herself. Okay, I can do that. The butler extended a pale, gloved hand toward the far wall. A mirror emerged. It wasn't there before. Now it was large, antique, warped at the edges, like something stolen from a haunted house. Its glass was too dark, too murky, like it had been dipped in shadow. Lexi swallowed. I just have to stare? That's it. The butler nodded, his grin stretching. Yes, she hesitated, then stepped toward the mirror. Her reflection looked wrong. It wasn't an illusion. It wasn't just the warped glass. The Lexi in the mirror was too still. She didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move, just stared back with dead, empty eyes. The timer appeared on the wall. 60. Lexi squared her shoulders. Okay, I can do this. She locked eyes with herself. 55. Her reflection tilted its head. Lexi didn't. 50. A flicker, barely noticeable, but her reflection's lips twitched upward. Lexi's did not. She gasped, stumbling back. Did you see that? Did you see that? The butler tut-tuted. You looked away. Lexi's breath hitched. What? You lost. The room plunged into darkness. A whisper, low, wet, wrong. Then Lexi screamed. We couldn't see her, couldn't see anything, but we heard it. Her voice rising in terror. The sound of something wet and heavy sliding across glass. Then a snap. The darkness lifted. Lexi was gone. The mirror was gone. But where it had stood, something else had taken its place. A new game piece. Tiny, wooden, and carved into Lexi's exact likeness. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. The game had taken her. I pushed back from the table, my heart pounding. No, this isn't happening. Blonde guy, Mr. College athlete, was shaking his head. What the fuck? What the fuck just happened? Stranger Things hoodie was gone. Lexi was gone. Now there were 4 of us left. My hands clenched into fists. There has to be a way out. There's not. We all turned. The guy with dark eyes and red flag energy, the one who hadn't said much since we got here, was staring at the board, his expression unreadable. You knew. I snapped. He didn't look up. I had a suspicion. Blonde athlete lunged at him, grabbing his hoodie. You knew. He didn't react, just said, calmly, "This game isn't about winning." Blonde athlete froze. What? Dark eyes exhaled, finally meeting his gaze. It's about who loses last. Silence, heavy, drowning. Then the dice rolled. Player 3, Carter. Blonde athlete Carter went pale. The board shifted again, and the room began to change. I used to think I wasn't a coward. I mean, sure, I've chickened out of dumb things before, cliff jumping, asking my high school crush to prom, watching Hereditary alone at night, but real, actual fight or flight terror? I never thought I'd freeze. But when the board burned Carter's name into the wood, when the dice rolled on their own, when the entire mansion rumbled like it was waking up hungry, I did nothing. Just sat there, paralyzed, watching Carter's hands tremble as he stared at his name. Player 3. Carter, his chest rose and fell too fast, like his lungs couldn't get enough air.
No.
No, 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 not me. The butler's voice was smooth as silk. The game has chosen. Carter pushed back from the table so fast his chair screeched against the wood. Screw that. I'm not playing. I should have warned him. I should have told him that the game doesn't take no for an answer. Because the second he tried to run, the house fought back. Carter bolted for where the front doors had been, right before the mansion decided to delete them from existence. He slammed into the wall full speed, expecting an exit crack. The sound of bone hitting solid would send a shockwave through my stomach. He reeled back, clutching his now bleeding nose. But he didn't stop. He spun, darting toward a side hallway, shoes pounding against the floor. The second he crossed the threshold, slam. The walls closed in. Like a living thing, the house twisted, shifted, rearranged itself. What had been an open corridor sealed itself shut, trapping him inside. A heartbeat of silence. Then Carter's screams, muffled, distant, coming from inside the walls. Oh God. I shot up from my chair. Carter? Carter. His voice was warped, like he was being dragged further and further away. Get me out. Get me the fuck out. Panic surged through me. I turned to the others. We have to do something. But before anyone could move, the board shifted. A new message carved itself into the wood. Underneath, in smaller text, Carter, you love the thrill of the chase. Let's see how fast you really are. You have 60 seconds to survive. My stomach dropped. The timer appeared on the wall. 60. Then we heard it. A low, guttural growl. Not human. Not anything that should exist. 50. A new sound joined it. Claws scraping against wood. Fast. Skittering. Like something huge and starving was crawling toward him. Carter screamed. 45. I pounded on the wall where I'd last seen him. Carter. Run. 40. The sound of footsteps. His footsteps. Pounding through the unseen corridors of the house. Then another sound. Something bigger. Running after him. 35. Carter's breath was ragged. Panicked. I could hear him gasping for air. 30. He was fast. A former track star, he had said earlier. I prayed it would be enough. 25. The growling thing chased him faster. 20. A snapping sound, like teeth clicking together. Oh God. 15. Carter's voice broke. It's right behind me. 10. A deafening crash. The sound of something heavy tackling him to the ground. 5. Carter let out a blood-curdling scream. 0. Silence. The board let out a low creaking sound, almost like it was satisfied. A new game piece materialized. Carter's face, frozen in horror. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Carter was gone, swallowed by the house. And the worst part? We hadn't even seen what killed him. Lexi and James had gone fast. But this was worse. Blonde purse girl. Her name was Maya. I realized distantly. Made a whimpering sound. Her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. I want to go home, she whispered. I don't want to play anymore. None of us do, I said. She shook her head violently. No, you don't get it. I can't do this. She sucked in a sharp breath, her entire body trembling. We're all going to die, aren't we? Nobody answered, because the truth was sitting right in front of us, staring us in the face. James, gone. Lexi, gone. Carter, gone. The house had sealed itself. There was no calling for help, no escape, and the game wasn't stopping. The dice rolled again. Player 4, Maya. She let out a sob. The board shifted, and the next challenge began. I've had panic attacks before. One in 8th grade, when I forgot my lines during a school play and stood there, frozen, while the entire auditorium stared at me. Another when I lost my job last year and realized I had about $42 to my name and rent due in a week. But nothing, compared to the feeling of watching 3 people vanish into the abyss, knowing my turn was coming. And now, Maya, aka Blonde Purse Girl, aka the only person here who was freaking out more than me, was next. Her name burned into the board. The dice rolled on their own. She was sobbing now, her hands pressed to her temples, her head shaking over and over like if she denied reality hard enough, it would just stop. Player 4. Maya, her breath hitched. No. The board shifted again. A new message carved itself into the wood. Underneath, smaller text burned into existence. Maya, you always choose yourself. Now choose someone else. Sacrifice another player and you may go free. Refuse and the game will choose for you. The timer appeared on the wall. 60. Maya's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. She looked at me, at Red Flag Energy Guy, whose name I still didn't know, at the last person remaining. A skinny dude in glasses, who had barely said a word this whole time. Her hands shook violently. Choose someone else? She whispered. You mean, kill someone else? The butler tilted his head, his grin stretching wider. That's the game. The rest of us? We were dead silent. Maya's hands clenched into fists. I won't do it. The butler's grin did not falter. Then the game will decide. 50. The house shook, like a monster stirring in its sleep. Wait! She choked out. Just wait. She looked at each of us, wild-eyed, and for a split second, I saw the thought flash across her face. She was considering it, choosing one of us. I should have been horrified, but I got it. It was so easy to say I'd never do that until you were the one staring death in the face. But then her whole body seized up. Her eyes went wide. She wasn't breathing. Maya! I reached for her. Then her feet left the ground. Maya rose into the air like a marionette, arms jerking unnaturally at her sides. Her head lolled back, mouth opening in a silent scream. Then she twitched violently. Her fingers snapped backward. I heard the bones crack. She let out a strangled gurgling sound, eyes rolling back into her skull. And then she turned toward me, not on her own. Something spun her body unnaturally in the air, like a puppet dangling from invisible strings. And she reached for me, her broken fingers stretched outward. She was trying to choose me. The butler's voice echoed through the room. The game has decided. Maya's head jerked toward the ceiling. Her body contorted, twisting in ways no human body should move. Then the shadows ripped her apart. Not metaphorically, physically. Black, clawed hands erupted from the darkness, gripping her arms, her legs, her face. They pulled. I heard her screech, a noise so raw and inhuman, it made my stomach flip. Her skin stretched like melting wax, and then she was gone. Her wooden game piece appeared on the board. Her mouth was carved open in a scream. Something inside me snapped. I shoved back from the table, my chair toppling over. I am done with this shit. The butler sighed. We've been over this.
No! Isnapat.
Fuck you. Fuck this game. I turned to Red Flag Energy Guy and Glasses Dude. We're getting out of here. Glasses Dude shook his head violently. Did you not just see what happened? There's no way out. There has to be. Because if there wasn't, we were already dead. I ran. Didn't care where. Didn't care how, just ran. The hallway stretched out in front of me. Endless. Like the house was warping reality, trying to keep me inside. But then I saw it. A door, slightly open, a crack of dim light spilling through. My heart slammed in my chest. I lunged for it. The second my fingers touched the doorknob, everything went wrong. The floor vanished. One moment, I was sprinting toward the door. The next, I was falling, plummeting into absolute blackness. No ground, no walls, just empty void. I screamed, and then I landed, hard, on something soft and wet.
He rolled over, gasping.
And I realized what I was lying on. Flesh, the walls, the floor, everything. It wasn't wood anymore. It was alive. A heartbeat thundered beneath me. The walls shuddered, contracting like lungs inhaling. I gagged, scrambled to my feet, and then in front of me the butler, standing perfectly still, smiling. New rule, he said smoothly. My stomach twisted. What? His silver eyes gleamed. The game doesn't end when there's one survivor. I went cold. He leaned forward. It ends when the game decides it's over. My breath stopped.
No! Iwisparat.
That wasn't how it was supposed to go. We were supposed to get out. his grin stretched too wide. "Oh," he said softly, "did you think this was about winning?" The house rumbled around me. The walls convulsed, pulsing like a massive, living beast. My pulse pounded in my skull, because suddenly I knew the truth. There was no winning, no escape, only the game, and the game never ends. I used to think horror movies were exaggerations, that nobody really froze when something chased them, that real people wouldn't just stand there, wide-eyed and stupid, while the monster reached for them. I used to think I'd be different, that I'd be smart enough to survive. But now I was standing in the belly of something alive, with walls that breathed, pulsed, and oozed blood, while the butler from hell grinned at me like I was his next meal. And I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because the second he said it, the second he let the words sink in, the game doesn't end when there's one survivor. It ends when the game decides it's over. I realized the truth. We were never supposed to leave. The house shuddered around me, the fleshy walls convulsing like a massive, breathing lung. I gagged, stumbling backward. My shoes squelched against the ground, wet, meaty, slick. Oh God, this place wasn't a house. It was a living thing. You feel it, don't you? The butler's voice was almost gentle. The house, the game, the hunger. I shook my head, fighting nausea. This isn't real. The butler laughed, a dry, paper-thin sound. "Oh, my dear." He stepped forward, tilting his head. "You still think this is about winning?" He leaned in close, his voice a whisper in my ear. "The house plays you." I went ice cold, because I knew he wasn't lying. This wasn't just a cursed game. It was alive, and it was feeding. The house shuddered again, and suddenly, I wasn't in the flesh room anymore. I was somewhere else. A blur of images warping and twisting around me. A mansion decades ago. Velvet curtains, candlelight, a long wooden table surrounded by strangers in elegant clothing. Not us, not now, but another group of players. A woman in a black dress clutched her throat, choking on something invisible. A man beside her screamed as his skin melted like wax. Their game board sat in the center of the table, different from ours but the same. I stumbled back. What is this?" Butler's voice echoed in my head. "You're not the first to play, and you won't be the last." The scene shifted again. Now I saw others, groups from different eras. A family from the 1950s. Their terrified faces illuminated by a flickering TV. A group of hippies in the 70s, clutching their heads as something whispered in their ears. A trio of kids in the 90s, backs pressed together as shadows swarmed them. And all of them had the same board game. All of them had played, and none of them had won. The images vanished. I was back in the flesh room, my stomach twisting in knots. I turned to the butler, my hands clenching into fists. "What the hell is this?" He smiled. "A tradition." I staggered backward. "A what?" He spread his hands. "The house was built for this. To play. To feed." His silver eyes gleamed. "The game has existed longer than you can comprehend. It moves, changes, and it always finds more players." I shook my head. No, I don't accept that. "That's the beauty of it," he said smoothly. "You don't have to." I felt like I was going to throw up. This wasn't random. It wasn't a haunted house or a cursed object. It was a system, a cycle, an endless game that played people, not the other way around. And once you rolled the dice, you were part of it forever. A low rumble shook the house. The walls pulsed, tightening around me. The game wasn't done. The butler's grin widened. "It's time." I whirled toward him. "For what?" "The next roll." "No." I sprinted toward the nearest exit. Didn't care where it led. Didn't care if I had to rip the walls apart with my bare hands. I just knew I had to get out. But the second I moved, the floor dropped out beneath me. I fell, plunging into complete darkness. I hit the ground hard. The wind ripped from my lungs. I coughed, gasping for air, my body screaming in protest. Then I heard them, whispers. I froze. They weren't coming from around me. They were inside my head. Faint at first, like static on an old TV, but then clearer. Voices overlapping, frantic, desperate. "Help us. Don't let it win. It's always hungry. You have to break the cycle." I clamped my hands over my ears, shaking. "Stop." But the voices didn't stop, because they weren't just whispers. They were players, the ones who lost, and they were trapped here. I forced myself to stand. The darkness shifted around me, and suddenly, I saw them. Figures. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. All of them hollow-eyed. All of them trapped. They stared at me. Then, one by one, they raised their hands, pointing behind me. Slowly, my heart hammering, I turned, and there it was, the board game, waiting for me. The dice rolled on their own. My name burned into the wood. Player 5. My throat closed up. No, I couldn't. But the butler's voice whispered in my ear. Your turn. The game pieces moved, and the house swallowed me whole. There's something about losing all hope that changes the way you breathe. The shallower, faster, like your body is desperate to cling to air, even when your brain has already accepted the inevitable. I could feel it now. The truth of the game had sunk in. There was no winning, no outsmarting it, no breaking the cycle. And yet, here we were, 3 of us left. Me, Theo, red flag energy guy, now confirmed to be hiding way too many secrets, and Ethan, glasses dude, who had been eerily quiet since Maya died. We sat around the board, the shadows pressing in, the mansion breathing like a living thing. I didn't know what was worse, the waiting or the knowing, because deep down I knew the game was about to turn us against each other, and it was going to be brutal. The dice rolled by themselves again. The board shuddered, the wood splitting open as new words etched themselves into existence. 5th challenge. Make your choice. There are 3 of you left. 2 will move forward. 1 must be sacrificed. Decide amongst yourselves. If no decision is made in 60 seconds, the game will choose for you. A heavy silence filled the room. The timer appeared on the wall. 60. None of us spoke. 55. I could hear Ethan's breath shake. 50. Theo leaned forward, his dark eyes unreadable. We don't have to do this. Ethan snapped his head up. Are you insane? We have to pick someone or it's going to pick for us. Exactly, Theo said, voice calm. And you know damn well it'll choose me or her. I blinked. What? Ethan let out a harsh laugh. Oh, come on, don't act stupid. It's obvious. I felt my stomach churn. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Ethan shot Theo a look. Tell her. Theo didn't respond. Tell her how the game isn't really random. My pulse pounded. What? Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his sweaty hair. The game chooses who it thinks is weakest, the most scared, the easiest to break. His eyes locked on me. And that's you. The words slammed into me like a punch. Me? Weakest? My whole body went cold. Bullshit, I snapped. It's random. You really believe that? Ethan scoffed. Look at the order so far. James, nervous, skeptical, cracking jokes to hide his fear. Lexi, panicked, emotional, desperate to cling to reality. Carter, too stubborn to accept what was happening. Maya, literally begged not to play. And now me? I swallowed. No. That's not true, I whispered. Ethan just shrugged. Maybe, but it doesn't matter, does it? He sat back, stretching his arms. Because at the end of this, you're going to die either way. The timer continued ticking. 40. Theo finally spoke. No one has to die. Ethan rolled his eyes. Are you actually suggesting we just sit here and let the game pick? You want to take that chance? Theo's hands clenched into fists. I'm saying we find a way to... No, Ethan snapped. No bullshit noble speech. We have to choose someone, right now. His gaze hardened. His target was clear. Me. 30 seconds left. Ethan stood up. I did too, my instincts screaming at me to move, to fight, to do something. He took a slow step forward. His voice was eerily calm. We can do this the easy way or... Then crack. Ethan lunged for me. I barely had time to react before he shoved me backward, his grip vice-tight on my arms. I gasped, stumbling. He was stronger than I thought, and he was trying to force me into the dark, into whatever void had swallowed the others. Ethan, stop. I struggled, trying to break free. Just let go, he muttered. You're already dead. Theo moved. Fast. 1 second, he was still. The next, he was slamming into Ethan, tackling him off me. They crashed to the ground. The wooden floor splintered beneath them. Ethan snarled, swinging wildly. He punched Theo hard, his fist cracking against his jaw. But Theo didn't stop, didn't even flinch. His hands wrapped around Ethan's throat, and he squeezed. Ethan choked. His eyes bulged. His mouth opened, gasping, struggling, gurgling. Theo's voice was low, steady. You shouldn't have touched her. 10 seconds left. Titan. Ethan's face turned red, and then the board shuddered. A new message burned into existence. Sacrifice accepted. Ethan screamed. The floor beneath him opened up. Darkness rushed upward, swallowing him whole. His hands clawed at the wood, trying to stop himself. Theo let go. Ethan's body vanished into the abyss. 0. His game piece appeared on the board. Mouth open, eyes wide, frozen in horror. And just like that, he was gone. Silence. Theo exhaled, rubbing his bruised knuckles. I just stared. I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I felt was cold. Theo met my gaze. His expression was unreadable. You okay? I opened my mouth, closed it, because what was I supposed to say? That I was grateful he saved me? That I didn't recognize myself anymore? That I knew, deep down, the game was far from over. I looked at the board. Only 2 players left, me and Theo. And the game wasn't done playing with us yet. There were only 2 of us left. Me, Theo. The game wasn't over. And I fucking knew whatever was coming next would be worse than anything we had seen before. I should have been grateful that I made it this far. But as I stared at the newly burned name on the board, Ethan's wooden game piece, mouth frozen in that final silent scream, I couldn't feel anything but a dull, sinking horror. The house had taken 5 of us already, swallowed them, erased them, and now it was hungry for its last course. The air inside the mansion felt different now. The walls weren't just walls anymore. They breathed, pulsing like giant lungs. The chandeliers above us swung gently, even though there was no wind. The floor was slick beneath my fingers, warm like flesh. I pulled my hand back. I wanted to throw up. Theo sat across from me, staring at the board with an expression I couldn't read. His dark eyes flickered toward me, then back to the dice. We're almost at the end, he murmured. I swallowed, yet neither of us moved. Neither of us dared. The butler, who had been watching this entire time with that same horrible, polite smile, tilted his head. Shall we begin? Neither of us answered. The dice rolled anyway. The board shifted, and the last challenge burned into the wood. Final challenge. The last player stands underneath. The words twisted and reshaped, forming something new. Only one player leaves. The other must stay. Decide who will survive. My stomach dropped. Theo let out a sharp breath. Fuck, I felt like I was falling. No. I shot to my feet. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. The butler's silver eyes gleamed. The game has always been clear. Bullshit. My voice cracked. It said the game ends when there's one survivor. He smiled wider. Did it? I opened my mouth, closed it, because I realized it never said that. Not once. We had assumed. Like idiots, we had assumed. But the rules never said the last player leaves. Only that the game must end. And now it was waiting for us to decide. Theo was staring at the board, his expression unreadable, his jaw clenched, muscles twitching under his skin. We don't have a choice, he murmured. My breath hitched. We can find a way. He laughed, but it was empty. Find a way. His dark eyes locked onto mine. Look around. The house isn't even pretending anymore. It's alive. It's been feeding on us this whole time. His fingers curled against the table. If neither of us picks, it'll choose for us. The timer appeared. 60 seconds. I stared at it, my chest tightening. 59, 58. No. I turned to Theo, desperation clawing at my throat. We don't have to do this. He let out a breath. We do. I shook my head violently. No. There has to be another way. There's not. His voice was calm. Too calm. I felt sick. 50 seconds. Something inside me cracked. Theo was looking at me like he already knew the answer. Like he had already made his choice. Like I was the sacrifice. I stepped back. You're gonna choose me. He didn't say anything. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. You son of a bitch. You're gonna pick me. Theo exhaled through his nose. It's not personal. I saw red. Not personal. Not fucking personal. 40 seconds. I backed up another step, my fingers curling into fists. I thought you were different. I thought. His eyes flashed. Don't do that. 35 seconds. My heart was slamming against my ribs. You were gonna kill Ethan to save me, because he was going to kill you first. His voice was ice. This is different. Different, because now it was me. Now it was his choice. And he wasn't. I didn't think. Didn't hesitate. I moved. 30 seconds left. I lunged at him, grabbing the nearest thing I could. a jagged piece of broken wood from the splintered table. Theo barely had time to react before I swung it at him. He dodged, but barely. The wood ripped through his shoulder, tearing fabric, slicing skin. He cursed, stumbling back. "Are you fucking? You were gonna choose me," I panted. "So I'm choosing first." His eyes darkened. Something in him snapped. 25 seconds. Theo lunged. I barely ducked in time. He grabbed my wrist, twisting it hard, forcing me to drop the wood. I gasped in pain, kneeing him in the stomach. He grunted. His grip tightened. 20 seconds. We slammed into the table, the board game shuddering beneath us. Theo grabbed the wood. I saw the decision flash across his face. I saw him decide, and I knew he was about to kill me. 15 seconds. I didn't have time to think. I threw myself forward, knocking him off balance. We both crashed into the board. The game pieces tumbled. The board shook violently, and then a new message burned into the wood. "Rule violation detected." The butler appeared instantly, silver eyes gleaming. "Oh dear," he mused. "That wasn't very sportsmanlike." Theo and I froze. The shadows rushed in, faster than before, stronger. I felt them wrapping around my ankles, my wrists, crawling up my neck. Theo screamed. I screamed. The board shuddered violently, then ripped apart. Darkness swallowed us whole. And then I was falling. Falling isn't like how they show it in movies. There's no slow motion, no arms flailing dramatically, no time to think. It's fast, sudden, terrifying, like being yanked out of reality, ripped away from everything solid and thrown into nothingness. I was falling. Theo was falling. The mansion had collapsed into blackness, swallowing us whole. Cold, I opened my mouth to scream and slammed into the ground. I landed hard on something smooth and freezing. My entire body screamed in pain, my lungs fighting for air. I coughed, rolling onto my hands and knees. The floor beneath me was polished black stone, as cold as ice. Theo groaned somewhere nearby. I blinked rapidly, trying to focus. We weren't in the mansion anymore. We were in a massive circular room. No doors, no windows, no walls. Just an endless black abyss stretching beyond the stone floor. And in the center, the board game, perfect, untouched, waiting. I shivered, forcing myself to stand. My legs trembled, my vision still blurry. Theo? Pained cough. "Yeah, I'm here." I turned to him. He was pale, clutching his arm where I had cut him. Blood soaked through his shirt, but his eyes were sharp, alert. He saw the board at the same time I did, and his face drained of color, because sitting neatly in our chairs, as if they had never left, were our game pieces. And mine. The game wasn't done with us yet. A familiar voice echoed through the void. The butler. But when we turned, he wasn't there. Just his voice, drifting through the darkness like a whisper in a graveyard. "Congratulations," he said smoothly. "You are the last two players standing." I swallowed, my throat raw. "Where are we?" A low rumble echoed through the space. "The last roll must be made," the butler continued. "One final decision." New words burned into the wood. "Final challenge. The last roll, both players will roll the dice. The lowest number will stay. The highest number will leave." I felt my stomach turn to ice. "The lowest number stays?" I turned to Theo. He was staring at the board, his hands clenched into fists. The game wasn't choosing a winner. It was choosing a replacement. One of us would escape. The other would be trapped here, forever. His jaw was clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might shatter. "Fuck," he muttered. "Yeah, fuck." I took a shaky breath. "There has to be another way." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really think that?" I looked at him. "You don't." He exhaled slowly, his eyes never leaving the board. If there was another way, someone would have found it by now. The dice sat in the center of the board, waiting. I could feel the weight of them, like they weren't just dice, but something alive, watching, hungry. Theo flexed his fingers. "We roll, that's it." My stomach churned. "And if we don't?" He finally looked at me. "Then the game decides for us." I believed him. I didn't know how, but I knew if we refused to roll, something worse would happen. Something much, much worse. I reached out. My fingers closed around one of the dice. Theo grabbed the other. For a long moment, we just sat there, holding them. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I could hear Theo's breathing slow, controlled, forced calm. I knew what he was thinking. I was thinking it too. If I roll low, I die here. My hands trembled. I closed my eyes. Then I rolled. The dice clattered against the board, spinning wildly. I held my breath. Theo's dice landed first. 4. Mine rolled for a second longer. Then it landed. 2. A cold, sinking weight filled my chest. Theo stared at the board. His hands twitched, but he didn't move. I felt like I was falling again, like the ground had opened beneath me, and I was already slipping into the void. Because I lost. I was staying. Forever. The butler's voice returned, smooth and patient. The game has chosen. The shadows began to move, reaching for me. I felt the cold crawl up my arms, my legs. Theo stood up. I turned to him, my chest tightening. Theo? But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the dice. His expression changed. A shift, a decision, and then he moved. Fast. He grabbed my dice. I gasped, watching in shock as he flipped it over. To a 6. The shadows froze. Theo turned to the darkness, his voice even. She won. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the board accepted it. The numbers burned into the wood. Tachio. To me. 6. A new message carved itself into the game. Winner confirmed. I hit solid ground. My eyes flew open. I was outside, lying in the dirt in front of the mansion. The sky above me was gray, the air heavy with the promise of rain. I gasped, sitting up. My hands dug into the cold earth. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned toward the mansion. It was gone. Nothing but an empty field. The invitation, the one that had brought me here, was still clutched in my fingers. I unfolded it. It was blank, like none of it had ever happened. But I knew I had survived. But at what cost? Because as I stood, a single thought crept into my mind. The game never ends, and one day it would call again, for someone else. Or maybe, for me. I didn't leave that mansion. Not really. Sure, my body did. I woke up in an empty field where the house used to be. Cold dirt beneath my fingers. The sky dull and gray above me. But my mind was still inside that fucking game. It had been 3 days. 3 whole days since I woke up outside. Alone. No sign of the house. No sign of Theo. No proof that any of it had even happened, except for the ache in my bones and the weight in my chest that I couldn't shake. I should have felt relieved. I should have been celebrating. But survival isn't the same as freedom. And deep down, I knew I hadn't really escaped. I don't remember getting home. 1 second, I was in that empty field, staring at my own trembling hands. The next, I was in my apartment, standing in the middle of my kitchen, my phone buzzing in my pocket. A text from my coworker, Olivia. Hey, you okay? You kinda disappeared for a few days. I stared at the screen. My fingers shook as I typed back. Yeah, just needed some time away. A lie. I didn't even know how long I had been gone. I checked the date. It was the same night I had received the invitation. No, that wasn't possible. I had been gone for days, but my phone said otherwise. My messages, my emails, my notifications, they all acted like I had never left, like none of it had ever happened. I should have been grateful, but instead, I felt sick, like something had followed me home. And then, I saw it, sitting on my kitchen counter, a game piece carved from dark wood and shaped exactly like Theo. I didn't touch it, didn't even move. I just stared at it, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Theo was gone. The house had taken him. But here he was, in wooden form, staring at me with hollow, carved-out eyes. A splintered whisper crawled into my mind. The game doesn't end. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as dust. The piece just sat there, motionless, waiting. I wanted to throw it out the window, burn it, smash it with a hammer until nothing remained but splinters. But I didn't, because some part of me, deep in my gut, knew it would come back. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the mansion, back at the table, the board in front of me, the dice rolling by themselves, and the butler standing in the shadows, smiling with those silver eyes that had seen centuries of players come and go. In one dream, I was sitting across from Theo. He looked normal, alive, but then he opened his mouth, and 1,000 voices poured out, screaming, begging, wailing in a chorus of agony that shattered my bones from the inside out. I woke up drenched in sweat, my sheets twisted around me like restraints, and when I sat up, gasping for breath, the game piece was closer, sitting on my nightstand. I hadn't moved it. Day 4, I stayed inside, didn't go to work, didn't answer calls, just sat on my couch, the TV playing some reality show at low volume, my mind barely registering it. I hadn't touched the game piece. It was still sitting by my bed, but I could feel it, watching, waiting. I was debating whether to just leave my apartment for good when I heard the sound. A soft slip, like something being pushed under my door. Slowly, I turned my head. A piece of paper rested just inside my apartment. My blood ran cold. No. I knew what it was before I even picked it up, but I did anyway, and there it was, that same invitation. You are invited to an exclusive game night. The winner takes home $100,000. A chill crept up my spine, because this time, there was no address, just 3 words, written in blood-red ink. It's your turn. I dropped the invitation like it had burned me. My chest felt tight, too tight, like my lungs weren't working right. It had come back. For me, it wasn't over. It would never be over. The game wasn't just a curse. It was a cycle. And I wasn't just a survivor. I was next in line. The next game master. Just like the others before me. Just like Theo. I clutched my head, shaking. No, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't bring others into this nightmare. But as I stood there, staring at the invitation, I realized something horrifying. The game didn't care what I wanted. It would make me play, one way or another. Couldn't fight it, but maybe I could delay it. I grabbed the invitation, ripping it into pieces. I snatched the game piece off my nightstand, throwing it into my trash can, burying it beneath old takeout boxes and coffee cups. It wouldn't work forever. The game would come back. But maybe for now I could pretend. I could live like a normal person. Maybe I had a few more days, a few more weeks, maybe even months before the game called me again. I'd use every second, because deep down I knew when the next group of players sat down at that cursed board, I would be waiting for them. Weeks passed. I ignored the nightmares, ignored the shadows shifting in my apartment, ignored the way every so often I'd hear dice rolling in the dark. Then, one morning, I was scrolling through my phone, just mindlessly checking social media, trying to feel normal. That's when I saw it. Post. A missing persons report. 6 names. 6 faces. They had all disappeared on the same night. And my blood ran ice cold, because I recognized one of them. It was Olivia, my coworker, the one who had texted me, asking where I had been. The game had moved on. It had found new players. And somewhere, deep in the darkness of an impossible mansion, the game had begun again, and this time, I was the one waiting in the shadows.